here. I love you all.
Hello and welcome to the Scannain Podcast, your weekly look at the world of film news, Irish International. I'm Darren Mooney, and joining me are...
Jay and Ronan.
So we're going to talk about what we normally do on this podcast, which includes the top 10, the new releases, and the week in film news. But we're going to start with what we normally do. So Jay, what have you watched since last we talked?
There's been a few things. As everybody knows who regularly listens to the show, Varda season never ends, so we started again with another one, which is Lions Love.
Higher, stronger, Varda, faster.
I like that. That's
the
a nice
way.
tie-in with a certain new release. Lions Love, which is it was kind of unavailable for quite some time, I think, as a film, and then became available generally on a streaming service when I watched a movie, which is a Varda documentary in the time when she was in the States, with her husband Jack Shabby, and they were kind of being courted a little by Hollywood, so she just ended up doing little documentaries, both short and features, and a few other things when she was there, because she was quite prolific. And this one is a really interesting story about a kind of three people living together in the Hollywood kind of mansion, two guys and a girl. The girl played by Viva, who was one of the Andy Warhol family.
Oh, okay.
And mother to Gabby Hoffman, which I realised after I read
wow.
Yeah, I love Gabby Hoffman. And
Great.
the three of them just kind of gad about in a kind of, and the two guys that play the two guys are the guys that create Hair the Musical. Which
Oh,
also
that's
you know,
interesting.
which is,
That's fascinating.
so it's this kind of Hollywood-esque kind of free love 60s kind of parable that's as starts. That's essentially what it's kind of going for, you know, no inhibitions, all that kind of stuff. But then it kind of moves into the territory of the end of that third period, in the context of, on the TV is like Kennedy, the Robert Kennedy assassination.
Oh, okay, yeah. Which,
And then also,
1968.
so it's in that week where Andy Warhol was shot as well, and she apparently was on the phone to Andy Warhol
Wow.
when
When
it
it
happened by one of the other people in the family, I think.
Wow.
So it kind of covers this area whilst kind of going along with what's happening in the house and around the house, and it's got frequent visitors and whatnot, including Varda herself, in this kind of, because it has this kind of reflexive element, because it has Shirley Clarke, who was a really interesting filmmaker from kind of 40s, 50s, 60s in America, and I've seen a couple of her shorts on Filmstruck before it went away. She kind of plays herself coming to LA to pitch a film about Hollywood. So she turns up and lives staying in the house because it's the week of the convention, the Democratic convention, so there's no hotel rooms kind of thing, you know. And she stays there, and she
This is
kind
1968, right?
Yeah.
So this is the Chicago convention.
Yeah,
Which is
and
chaos, right?
yeah, and the whole thing is kind of set around that kind of, this is the kind of curdling of the American dream. And I mean, Inherent Vice has done it. Various other people have done it, where, you know, you kind of,
Well, the end of the
and you get
60s.
Altamont and stuff like that happens, and
Yeah.
Nixon coming into power and all
I mean,
that
even-
kind of idealism and stuff that was
Even
gone.
last year you had, like, was Bad Times at El Royale?
Yes.
Set around the same
Yeah,
time.
exactly. And this is a kind of Varda version of these kind of things, which is interesting. It's a touch too long. But it's never not interesting. And some of the camera work, it's not as formal as kind of previous stuff. She's a great camera person. She knows exactly where it should be. It's a little more freewheeling here, but it still works very, very well. It dazzles on occasion. The cast are kind of deliberately kind of, dense a strong word, but they're kind of living in a kind of alternate reality almost. And it's an incredible last shot actually as well. But it's very reflexive. Varda turns up in the film because she's like purportedly making a documentary about Shirley Clarke going to Hollywood. So there's this kind of weird kind of overlay of a kind of meta kind of commentary on it about Hollywood. And it's just under 2 hours with it. It's an hour 45, 50, which is pretty long for a Varda. It's longer. It's a Varda and a third.
Very much, yeah.
But well worth watching. It's not perfect, but it's really interesting. There's a lot of interesting ideas in there, and I would absolutely recommend as a watch.
I'm going to take your word on that and have it watched for next week. Because I don't like you having seen more Vardas.
I know you don't.
I'm very competitive on this.
I know.
15?
Yes.
I don't know what I'm on.
You probably,
What is the total, actually? What's the board?
it's shorts and features, maybe 60.
Yeah, she's on plenty.
There's a lot.
A lot keeps going. Don't worry, Darren. This will never end.
Yeah.
I'm not worried.
2 years now, we'll be still banging on about this. And one other one I watched was the Kevin MacDonald Whitney documentary.
Yes, interesting.
Okay.
Because
Yes.
I'd previously seen I think it was the Broomfield, was Nick Broomfield?
Yes.
The previous documentary, which is crap.
Yes,
It's
which is
awful.
very cynical.
It's really,
and
really
crap.
not good at all.
This does a hell of a lot better job of pretty much of contextualization for starters, about how and where Whitney came from and what she was doing and stuff like that. It does an interesting thing, which I'm not 100% comfortable in that it kind of keeps a revelation till kind of quite late. Yeah. And that works for the documentary in the context of what it's going for, but I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with it. It's an interesting one. And it doesn't really answer anything in it.
I quite like that in terms of the movie earned a lot, or the documentary earned a lot of goodwill. Yeah, in the first, say, 2/3.
No, it does, and it puts the spade work in fairness.
That's what it felt like it was doing before it got to that twist at the end, rather than front loading the sensationalism. It was very much like a trust us. We've done the legwork.
Structurally, I agree with you, and I think what they're going for is they've very carefully laid out the groundwork for it. It's still kind of sat slightly uncomfortably because there's no real substantiated thing around this, and that's fair enough, but it's I don't know. It just made me slightly uncomfortable. I mean, it was a little worrying in that regard.
I think it's kind of interesting. I liked it a lot, and what I really liked about the film is its kind of complexity, the complexity of its portraiture, that it kind of it suggests Whitney Houston as a person who was created from many different sources, who's a convergence of identities, whether it's sexuality, nationality, ethnicity. Yeah. And I think I understand what you're saying in that, in a way, that is almost proposed as a solution to everything. This is why she was complicated, because this happened and that's that. Then it almost feels as if it's veering towards that. It kind of
obliterates a lot of stuff with that revelation. I think that's probably where, and I think that's kind of where I'm coming from, because it is a sledgehammer to some degree when it arrives, and like, I mean, it's information that's, for a documentary, it's gold in the sense of.
Well, it was uncovered beforehand. It was.
Well, it wasn't used in the Broomfield one, I don't think, to any kind of.
Yeah, I mean, when I say it was uncovered, I mean it wasn't covered before. Sorry, that's.
One of
those composite words that's very difficult to use properly.
Yeah.
It was not covered before.
Yeah. It very much emerged in publicity for this. That this kind of, this got it a lot of attention.
Waiting,
But it's good. I mean, the loss of her and the vacuum it created is palpable. It comes across very, very well. And then the tragedy, obviously, the daughter as well is kind of grim and all the rest of it. And it's really, really brilliantly edited.
It is.
And I liked it a lot. But I can be a bit down on some documentaries because it can be a bit kind of, just so. And I'm aware that I'm a bit old-fashioned and a bit kind of intense about.
Well, this is your Netflix documentary.
Yeah, no, in fairness, McDonald's a very good documentarian.
Yeah, this is a very, very, very well made documentary.
Yeah, I agree.
Everyone would agree with that.
One Day in September is one of my favourites that McDonald did about the Munich thing from way back when, and it's very, very good. I like him as a documentarian, and he's a really good filmmaker. So, like, I mean, it gets past it. I really liked it, but there's a couple of kind of
of course,
but a couple of kind of we'll see. But it was interesting. I really liked it. To continue the documentary theme, I watched Free Solo eventually, finally. I really like this. It's an interesting documentary because it at its kind of central kind of area, it's a really simple story. It's like, there's a cliff, I want to climb the cliff. How do I climb the cliff? Because it's there, right? And that's fine. Like, great documentary made us out of simple stuff before. It's not any kind of inherent thing to it. No, it's not at all. And the character is really interesting because he's a bit of a selfish prick. Apologies to Grace if she really likes him. But he comes across, he's certainly self-centered in the way that perhaps you have to be fully concentrated on.
It's that stereotypical great man.
Yeah.
It's I've been put here to do this thing, and I'm going to do this thing, and it's unreasonable for anybody to ask why I would do this thing almost.
There's an element of that, and I think that's what rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And I think he mentions earlier on that, like, for that, like, there's very few things that are perfection, and in the context of climbing something with no ropes, if you do it, it's as close to perfection as you'll get, because if you don't be perfect, you're dead. And there's a really interesting the kind of selfish nature of somebody that has to be
pride, the level of pride.
There is, but there's also focus. I mean, if you get right down to the thing, like, of all the things you have to focus on and say, listen, I need to focus on this, that's probably important. And now, why anybody would do it is beyond me, but that's a different issue. I mean, that's again, because it's there, is being an argument for Everest and all that. No, absolutely not. And it doesn't need that, and doesn't even try to. And I think it's really well made. And because the documentarians, both of them are kind of part of the crew and the film and the kind of hanging off cliffs while recording it. The whole thing is a bit
It
of a
looks
kind of
amazing.
grooved and depth there. It is absolutely.
In terms of like scale, it's fantastic to watch.
But it has that kind of,
It's a National Geographic documentary, and it looks like a
technically,
National,
but it's technically very well. But I think he's a good. I think they're lucky to some degree that he is the way he is, because otherwise it would be a National Geographic documentary in that kind of staid way that that worthy documentaries are. I think he adds a sort of tension to it that it kind of needs to be a really good one, if you know what I mean.
My issue with it, and again, I think visually it's stunning.
I'd agree.
It's incredibly, like, for a documentary where you know the outcome based on the fact that you never read an obituary of this guy.
No, I'd never heard him, so there's a good chance he could be. No,
but the fact
I had a good sense that he didn't know.
Yeah. It creates a real palpable sense of
I
tension.
was a wreck near the end of it. Like, some of the stuff in it is.
What
are you doing? What are you doing?
Technically, it's incredibly well put together. The subject, he didn't really grok to me, and it's not like I disagreed with what he was doing and therefore I didn't like it. It's like I don't see anything interesting in this person. Like, it's
I somewhat agree with that.
I had like he's a blank slate. He's as blank as the rock face.
I think that
maybe I'm being harsh.
I think they're being slightly harsh. I think he's interested insofar as he's interested in himself and interested in the wall and interested in how we can concentrate to do the thing at the ignoring of everything else, including a girlfriend and probably family as well. Like, but
there's a wonderful moment where he's like, my girlfriend asked me, do I ever think about what would happen to the people I cared about if I died? And I'm like, not really.
Not really, yeah. But these guys, I mean, they go through obituaries of people that have died previously and stuff like that. So, I mean, this is like, I mean, it's, as I said, it's equal parts thrilling, inspiring, absolutely stupid fucking thing to do. But I mean, it's inspiring that somebody can do it.
There's something amazing in a documentary about a stupid thing. Like, I mean,
no, there is.
King
There
of Kong
absolutely
is like one of those great stupid documentaries.
But King Kong isn't going to kill you, most likely, This is like, you're 2,000 feet off the ground without any ropes. What the fuck are you doing? But it was still impressive in and of itself. Like, I liked it. But Jesus, like,
I'm less fond of it, but I would say technically, I think it's a fantastic piece of work.
Like, I've seen 4 out of 5 documentaries that were nominated for Oscars.
And this is your favourite?
No. Of Fathers and Sons, is my favourite at the moment. I've still to see Minding the Gap, which I'll watch very soon, probably before next week. But
what are the other two?
RBG
and 3 Identical Strangers, right?
Yeah, no. It's not 3 Identical Strangers. Don't say that, okay. Darren.
Sorry.
Trash.
I know it wasn't Mr. Rogers'
No,
Won't You Be My
was
Neighbour,
quite controversial.
which was amazing. Won't You Be My Neighbour?
It was Hell County this evening, which I really liked.
Right.
And that was on PBS, and I told everybody about it. If you have a VPN. Anyway, it's really good, and quite short as well, which I like.
It's been a public broadcaster.
Yes, indeed. But another one I watched, and I'll say, contextualise it, my wife, on my recommendation, following Ronan's recommendation, last year watched Mamma Mia, the original. I turned off after 15 minutes because she was appalled by how dreadful it was, and told me, quote unquote, never to recommend her anything that bad again.
I hope she didn't say never take her own.
No, she did not. I did not dump her on you. The temptation was there, I can assure you. I took the hit. So for the last 8 or 9 months, I've been trying to persuade her to watch the sequel and to tell her that it's really good.
And when you sat down, did she go, "Here we go again"?
She was like, she made the kind of thing of like, "Listen, I'll give it 20 minutes. If I like it, I'll try it.
Very fair.
If not, I watched it and she loved it. She absolutely loved it.
I'm thrilled.
And me too, because I was very nervous watching it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely great. I've mentioned Darren. No, Darren doesn't agree, but it's my favourite blockbuster of 2018.
I'm sorry, I didn't realise we were talking about Mission Impossible Fallout.
No, we're not.
Sorry.
But, like, it's great. It's absolutely great. The songs are fantastic. It's brilliantly edited. The script is great. It's really well directed. Well, I have a soft spot for the ramshackle nature of the first one, and I like it. So I won't have kind of that slur being fucking thrown at it. But this is way better in every sense. Like, in all levels, it's better. It's a better film.
Yeah.
Cast are great. The set sequences are great. It's really moving at times as well. It actually gets you. And
it's perhaps a little too long when it gets into the triumphant climb. Okay.
No. The share stuff you could have lost, but then you would have lost the share stuff.
You wouldn't have to lose it. You just would have had to tighten it.
You could. What
They're
part?
genuine. Like, I understand what you're saying. It is relatively long, but there is nothing I'd be willing to lose. I love this film.
The film resolves itself at like 75% of the runtime.
No.
No.
Darn.
The hotel opens. Everybody's there. It's beautiful.
But that scene, the
I'm not especially in it for the
scene.
resolution. The christening scene is
Fucking hell, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Okay.
Jesus, Darren.
Oh,
But anyway, it was beloved and loved, and it stands up extremely well.
I'm very, very glad to hear
It's
that.
very good. I
loved
quite
it.
enjoyed it, just in case that any is
Yeah,
No,
I-
I mean, in fairness, we had many weeks of talking about
Yes,
it.
I'm
Going back a couple months.
going to leave it at that. But I was just glad somebody else liked it. Too.
No, absolutely.
After the
And let's
crash and burn that was,
continue
on
to
the-
let's continue to share it with the world.
And finally, I'll mention one that both Ronan and Grace kind of urged me to watch, which is The Bling Ring. Sofia
yes,
Coppola's film. I'm kind of on record of saying I'm not a massive fan. I kind of loved Lost Translation when it came out. It's kind of
reluctant to revisit it.
No, I've revisited a few times,
Okay.
but it's done the heat thing where it's got worse and worse at every
I'm the
read.
same.
Pulled on it.
I very much cooled
It
on
seems every time I watch it that I see more of like, I'm not surprised I liked it then.
Yes.
And,
There's
with
a lot of
time
that.
and wisdom.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's true. And I watched Somewhere, which is dreadful.
Yeah.
Which one's Somewhere?
It's Stephen Dorff, is it? Or
yeah,
What?
Stephen Dorff
and the kid
lazing
knocking around the hotel, the Chateau Marmont.
That's the one.
It's dreadful.
It's awful. It's really
insufferable.
just unbearably slow.
Oh, I'm
Don't
not-
worry, Stephen Dora fans. We'll have news in the later
Oh,
section
great.
of the podcast.
I quite like her remake of The Beguiled, but not hugely. It's decent without being great. So there was trepidation in this one. I haven't seen Marie Antoinette. I think it's the only one of hers I haven't seen.
No, I
But,
haven't seen The Beguiled.
so I was going to this with a bit of a, we'll see. But I adored it. I absolutely loved it. This is really fucking good about how that kind of vacuous nature. It's like it starts off with that kind of vacuous nature of culture and how we, if you can transplant yourself into this space where people live who are clearly have it all kind of thing. And these young girls and one young guy who kind of staggers into this group of kind of friends, and they end up robbing the houses of like Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan and various other celebrities and a couple of people I've never heard of, but that's just on me. And then the ease at which you get into the houses and all that kind of stuff is remarkable, which I'm not surprised by because it is based on a true story and like it does listen to the thing. But it's extraordinary. Like, it's this the have and have lesses because these people aren't poor. So there's no real kind of thing of like these are robbing from the rich to give to the poor. Like these are moderately upper middle class. Their parents own businesses, kind of decent money. Went to these schools, flunked out of these schools into this school where they all can hang out. But I really liked about it, and it's beyond the kind of celebrity thing. It gets at this kind of LA weirdness, and I haven't seen LA captured with this kind of void probably since Mulholland Drive, where it kind of there's this one remarkable shot. I can't remember whose house it is, but there's this massive void shot of a house being robbed, and all you see is it's from the sky shot, and it's the house is lit up, and you see them kind of running around it on different floors to find stuff. Some parts lit up, some parts lights off, and it has this kind of it's completely silent. There's no music, and it's remarkable. It's this kind of
beautiful. I remember
horrid.
it very,
It's
very
a
well,
horrid, blank, empty slate of a place,
Yeah.
and I think it gets at something really well. It's brilliantly filmed, Great cast. The cast are fantastic. All the young cast in there, which I don't know a few of them, but and even like there's even nods to kind of a couple of films like there's Kirsten Dunst, in the nightclub, Dunst has been in her films, and and Virgin Suicide stuff, and it gets that kind of boredom and desperate state of a place where you can be anyone, and it's anonymity, particularly with acting and actors and kind of posing on red carpets and the kind of vacuous nature of the world in that way. And I think it's really remarkable. And I didn't see it when it came out, so it's 2013, so that's 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels really bang up today, like it was released last week, and it's getting at something really important. And I think it's really great, really great.
It's
so if you
extremely
haven't seen-
nuanced in its take on those
Yes.
kind of things you talk about. And I remember it came about roughly the same time as Spring Breakers. And it's
Oh God, it's so much better.
It's another one of these sort of young girls
Yeah,
going
I
wild
hated
kind of
Spring
things. I think, I actually kind of like Spring Breakers, but I very much remember at the time saying The Bling Ring is the film you want to talk about here.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I also mentioned American Animals. I think it's a much better take than that as well, and it's much more nuanced and much smarter.
Yeah, it's gender politics are really interesting.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm one that I suspect I'll be going back to fairly soon because I really want to kind of dig in a little bit and see what else
Really
is there.
making me want to go back to it.
I know, it was great.
ringing that
Really, I was
bell.
surprised. Like I thought I might like it because the storyline sounded interesting, but I was surprised at how much I loved it.
I remember watching it with my sister and mother. My mother went to bed about 10 minutes in, saying she couldn't stand it. My sister absolutely adored it.
And I can see it. And I think it's one of these films in the opposite way of Lost in Translation that'll just get better and better as time goes on, because I think there's a lot more to it than even because I went onto my letterbox, and you know when you go through your friends, 175 friends have seen this, the ones that half-star to 5-star kind of, it's all over the place.
Yeah, no, those are great.
It's huge. Like it's hugely
polarizing.
Yeah,
That's
fascinating.
Those ones are always interesting.
But I'd be intrigued to see it in terms of being a few years later, what people kind of revisits will do. But I loved it, absolutely loved it.
All right.
So
it might be the next Cloud Atlas in that sense.
Indeed,
so I'm going to keep pushing that.
I know you are. I liked it. I saw it. I watched it. I liked it.
Ronan, what have you watched since last we talked?
Well, I know you guys wrapped up the Dublin Film Fest stuff, and it feels like it was 100 years ago. But there is one thing I caught since I wasn't on last week.
Speaking of 100 years,
one thing I caught a little bit after the show 2 weeks ago. An Elephant Sitting Still, which is a 230-minute Chinese film by a first-time director called Hu Bo, who had some fame as a novelist. This is kind of a controversial one to talk about because he got involved in a very long dispute with his producers about the length of the film. He insisted that it had to be as long as he wanted it to be, and then took his life in the process of post-production.
He was very young.
He was 27, 28, I think.
Jesus.
So it kind of comes with that baggage. It's very difficult not to be aware of that going into the film. You know, the first thing when you look up the title is all this. And I mean, the film includes multiple suicides at different points. It's an extremely dark film, so it's impossible not to bring that biographical reading. That's true for every film, but
particularly in this context,
especially the case here. It is quite literally a 4-hour suicide note. It is extraordinarily heavy. So not the most easily digestible thing at, I think, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning or whatever it was.
Yes.
I think you described 13 people in the cinema with you, 13 brave souls.
In fairness, there were a few more did come in. A good representation of Dublin's Chinese community. There were a lot of people there to obviously support home films. The cinema filled up reasonably well by the time it started, and including some people coming in about 45 minutes in.
Well, I mean,
which is the equivalent
that's about the same as
of arriving 10 minutes late.
I love it.
So Bo was, I think, something of a protege of Bellatar at one point. And there's a clear influence there. There are some very, very long takes, the same kind of tone of despair. Whereas Tar, of course, usually filmed in black and white. This is a very sort of washed out colour palette that, isn't ever sort of used for high contrast. There is almost no colour in this world. And it's a very, very down, you can't oversell how generally depressing this film is.
We have a little sort of organizational group for this sort of thing, and afterwards Ronan let us know that while he greatly appreciated An Elephant Sitting Still, he would not be joining us for the rest of Sunday's films because he needed to curl up under a blanket and contemplate existence.
And understandably.
And I imagine, based on what you're describing, very understandably.
Yeah. But the thing that I always say, people talk about films like this as being, particularly depressing, soul-crushing, whatever. I think a film that focuses on ideas of depression and upset isn't necessarily as those things itself, because it can be interesting to have those perspectives, confirmed as stuff that other people feel, that other people are struggling in the world.
And you can find love and hope even
Absolutely.
in the darkest of times as well, I think.
There's a sense of solidarity in knowing that other people are going through the same thing. And this captures that very, very well. It's sort of extreme, rigorous formalism. Shots are often very, very long, tracing characters as they walk through the environment. It's set in a sort of nameless Chinese city, not really specified where it is. There's a clear sense that it's kind of representative of a bigger picture.
Kind of ginormous American Chinese cities that exist now.
It's absolutely. That people, cities that house tens of millions of people that we've never heard the name of. It is deeply critical of Chinese society in its sort of, the economic strata that are sort of driving people apart and pushing people towards crime. One of the main characters here, there are 3 strands that intertwine here and there, is a sort of low-key crime boss. He spends most of the film looking for the student who has accidentally pushed his brother down a staircase. That student is another one of the film's protagonists, and tries to run away from home because he's having severe problems with his parents who don't seem to care about him. And it's, as I say, extremely heavy, but in that remarkable way, there's a depth of humanity to it that I think you only get in films this length usually. The characters are so well realised over such a length of time, and I think it would be wrong to say that you don't feel the length. You do, and that's the intent of making a film this long. Like, I think the famous example from Bellatar is in Satin Tango. There are various parts where there is a clock ticking in the background. You would think is the last thing you need in a 7-hour, 12-minute film, but it sort of emphasises the nature of time and, you know, how people change over time. Yeah. This has learned a lot of lessons from Tar. Perhaps too many lessons. You can see that, you know, it's sort of reliant on his framework, but it is really quite remarkable.
There are worse people to learn from, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure its likelihood of getting any kind of wide release. I believe it got a limited release in the UK at some point last year, so I don't know the likelihood.
Kind of, critics went to bat for it a little bit.
Yeah. It is. If slow cinema is the kind of thing you're into, it's well worth seeking out. It's quite remarkable. And I think it wound up accepting old films, topping my list of the best films of the festival.
Wow.
It is truly remarkable.
Nice. I will see it, and I think you can get it online in various places, so I'm going to do a bit of research because I would need to clear a day to watch it and recover. I think,
and I'm very glad to have got the chance to see it in a cinema, because it does it's sort of it's not structured in such a way that there are clear breaks.
So you couldn't sit down and pause.
Well, you absolutely could, and I don't think it would necessarily suffer a lot from it. But it was great to have that experience on this, because it is visually gorgeous, as much as there are greys and sort of grimness on screen. Really, really enjoyed that one. Well, if enjoyment is the word. Then caught up with some new releases. So Sauvage, the French film from Camille Vidal-Naquette, which I think Jay has seen as well.
Yes, and I really liked it, and I don't know if we're going to agree on that, are we?
I liked it. I did like it. It's got an absolutely...
You're not going to Sauvage it?
No, by no means. It's got an absolutely exceptional performance by Félix Marteau, who's one of the best up-and-coming French actors. He was in 120 BPM and was remarkable in that.
He's had a good year in that regard.
A bit of a side character in that, but really made his presence felt. Here he gets the chance to really step up to the plate, and I think he does really well, because at times I felt the script was slightly restrictive in what it allowed his character to be, and he overcomes that a lot of the time.
There's a couple of moments where you think, nah, you don't need to do that.
Yeah. And he absolutely manages to sell things that I think maybe in a lesser actor would seem strained.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but I felt held back from connecting to it quite regularly. Yeah. Couldn't quite put my finger on why.
I'd say some of this physical kind of and emotional kind of intimate moments I thought were remarkably well shot.
Yeah.
Like in ways, and like I'm not a big fan of sex scenes in films generally, because they just, most of the time they shouldn't be there, because they don't, other than to titillate an audience, there's no reason for them to be in a film.
Says the man who has yet to see Serenity.
Someday, Darren, my ship will come in.
The Joss Whedon classic?
No.
The John Cusack, that's Serendipity, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Serendipity.
It's the same thing.
Stephen Eston.
Close enough.
But the moment in which Matthew McConaughey ends a sex scene by declaring, "It's over, I win."
Oh wow!
Wow, yeah. The scenes in this film are kind of deliberately done in such a way to try and connect the character to plug them back into life, I guess, to a certain degree, and they're necessary in that regard. Yeah, which I liked. It kind of makes it balls at the end in a little bit.
It really does. The third act is
real
messy.
Yeah, it really is messy.
Yeah. Any sort of motivation that they've established in the character work before that is sort of thrown out the window for the convenience of various things.
And it's a pity, because I think there's some really interesting stuff in it. Yeah. I agree to some degree. Like, I don't think it's perfect, but I what I liked about it, I really liked.
Yeah, and I will be in the queue for the next film. Sure. From the filmmaker, it's as a debut, it's remarkable.
I think so.
The aesthetic control here
as well. Like, I
agree. Absolutely wonderful. After that, I caught the in sort of a tie-in for International Women's Day. The IFI did a presentation with Women Film and Television Ireland of various shorts by Irish female filmmakers. Really nice selection here. Good spread of things. Mostly very entertaining. There was one that I really didn't like. But
it's always the way in a group.
Well,
of
that's
yeah,
the way
of
that,
course.
I mean,
You throw 8 shorts at me.
Yeah.
If there's only one I don't like, I'm doing quite well.
Yeah.
They also handed out
Technically naked.
prizes at this. The winner was Lydia McGuinness's and Claire Burns' Her Name Is, which I caught at the FLA during the summer, and is really, really good. It's got 2 terrific performances from one of the directors also stars, and Fionn Walton as her abusive partner. He's
a fine actor, actually.
He really is, and he's very dynamic.
Yeah.
He manages in this film to be incredibly threatening, which is kind of surprising given the vulnerability that he's shown in stuff like What Richard Did, and Out of Here, of course.
Yeah.
It is very good, very deserving, understandable winner. Presented by Juanita Wilson, who was extremely vocal on her own fondness for it. The second prize went to the film that was really the standout for me, The Girl at the End of the Garden. It's called, made in collaboration with RTE Kids. It's for a young audience. This one's directed by Bonnie Dempsey. It's the longest of the bunch, I think. It was 15 minutes long. It's really, really good. Really entertaining, sort of family-friendly story that takes some strange twists and turns through sort of comedy and sci-fi and winds up making sort of understandable, without ever simplifying, the nature of direct provision to a child audience.
Okay.
It's really fascinating.
Difficult to do with that kind of tonal kind of control.
This was one of the things where I was sort of looking at the screen going, wow, this is ambitious. And it really pulls it off. This was the kind of thing that I walked out of the cinema going, okay, this is the one to toot about. It's really, really good. So any way you can seek that out, absolutely do it. Really terrific. But yeah, generally it's a great showcase of the female talent in Irish cinema.
Of which there are plenty.
Yeah, absolutely. And to have a filmmaker of Wilson's caliber presenting at that, she's of course one of our great representatives of any gender. Varda Season Never Ends. I also watched Uncle Yanko. Which, that's great, isn't it? This is very early in Varda's sort of US period. Yeah. She becomes aware of a distant relative who is, I think, her uncle with various removals or whatever.
Or maybe not.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a loose kind of relation. I think it's the best way to describe it.
It's very interesting. He is a sort of mad Greek man who's lived all over the world, is now settled in the US.
A sailboat or a little boat.
Living in a little boat. And Varda just, is obviously, throughout her career, obsessed with these sort of mad figures, being one herself, and goes for it. It's about 15 minutes long. Yeah. And they spend most of it, they're, very deeply serious conversations about art, life, family, nationality, where they've come to live in their lives. But it's very silly too. Yeah. That sort of filmmaking playfulness where there are, repeated jump cuts to different takes of Varda knocking on the door.
Yeah, it's like,
in various language. It's like I am Uncle Yanko,
nature.
then in French, I am your Uncle Yanko. It's very, very odd and very effective for it. I absolutely love this. These are the kind of Vardas that I lap up. Those very, very short, very silly, funny ones.
It's rigorous control even when it's silly. Like, she knows exactly the aim she's going for and gets there.
Yeah. And you always get the sense from them that she had very little time to do this, but and managed to pull it off with an extraordinary depth of complexity. Yeah. Everything looks extremely calculated and calibrated, yet feels loose and freewheeling.
Oh, you will like Lies Love. Well, I think you will.
I may well watch it tonight. And then 2 new releases. So Capharnaum I caught up on, which is the new film from Nadine Labaki. Previously talked.
I didn't get to, unfortunately, but I will get to it before next week.
I previously talked over the last couple of weeks of Caramel and Where Do We Go Now, her first 2 films. I was catching up ahead of this. Caramel I really loved. Where Do We Go Now is a bit of a step down, but it's still very, very interesting, and sort of showed the kind of talent she was. Capharnaum it's really a quantum leap forward, which isn't in any way to denigrate what she did before, obviously, but they don't quite prepare you for just how good this is. And it's interesting to me, she has been a lead in both of the previous films, and she takes a very minor acting role here. She's primarily an actor in Lebanon. She takes a very, very minor acting role here. And I think it's interesting in that the film's great strength is the sort of imaginative empathy at its heart. It is focused, unlike the previous films, which were very much based on the lives of Lebanese women. this is a little kid in the very poorest sections of Beirut society who is suing his parents for giving birth to him, is the framing narrative, and it's crafted around this with then flashbacks to what happened to him. His 12-year-old sister married off as soon as she had her first period, his reaction to that. It finds the most remarkable performance in its young lead, who is a Syrian refugee. Labki found him on the streets of Beirut essentially and cast him in this. His name's Zain al-Rafaya. And he's one of those faces that just the camera loves. You know, one of these great faces in cinema history. You go back to the likes of Passion of Joan of Arc. He is magnetic, his performance, and it's remarkable. Neither of Labiki's films had they had children in them, but neither of them had a massive focus on children. She's an incredible director of young performances. This film makes it abundantly clear. He throughout the course of the film, and the framing narrative is not quite abandoned, but you return to the court case so infrequently that you almost forget it's there. And I think the only criticism of the film is that it could be taken away quite easily, and it wouldn't lose anything for that. Not at all. He runs away from home after his sister is married off and gets in with this family, including an African refugee, who is then taken into custody as a sort of illegal immigrant, and he looks after her very young son. And it becomes this extraordinary buddy comedy, essentially, of the bleakest proportions. How Labaki got these two kids, who are both very young, to work together so effectively, I don't know. I don't know how anyone could do that. But they work together like Laurel and Hardy. It is hilarious throughout, which is remarkable.
And Jay is in.
Yeah. Oh, I was in anyway, but my God, I'm in now.
It's remarkable how funny it is, considering how desperately bleak it is. It's one of those films where, sat still for a while after the credits had finished rolling, just trying to gather myself. I can't wait to see it again, even though I know it will emotionally destroy me again. It is by miles the best film of the year so far, and I would be shocked if it's not in the top 3 at the end. It is wonderful.
Okay.
All right.
And really, really cannot recommend that enough.
And there was one more new release, that's going to be
that
in the top 10.
That is coming up in the top 10.
Oh, wow. Look at how sort of,
I know. I am prepared.
All right, then. I had a much more populist week, because of course I did. I spent a lot of it rewatching Twin Peaks The Return, but I'm not going to talk about that here. Don't worry, I'll have ample opportunity to talk about that sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Will you have enough time, do you think?
I think I'll have enough time. I'm not sure I'll be able to cram it all in. We'll figure it out, though, as we're going. But in terms of stuff I actually watched, film-wise, because, is it a film or is it a TV show? I rewatched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as the Mooney Family Movie Night, which is still fantastic. Still one of the best superhero movies of the past decade or so. We had an interesting discussion amongst ourselves about whether or not, if you were ranking your favorite, say, superhero movies of the past 20 or 30 years, where would the first Marvel Studios film rank in this? This is, I would argue, better than any of those. It's staggering, it's astounding, it's beautiful, it's well constructed. It's incredibly well animated, it's incredibly well written. It understands the way that audiences process films now. It's very quick. It acknowledges that people have probably seen these sorts of movies before, and so know things like, for example, how a villain's origin story works, and so it just needs to tweak the particulars and understand that you will get that as a result. It's really, really great. I really loved it. I also rewatched Kong Skull Island, which is,
I didn't mind it.
Yeah,
it's not great, but it held me.
It's much better than it should be. It's
Is this the one with Brie Larson?
Yes, it's one of those movies that kind of surprised me, which is, I like to think I go into every film screening with an open mind.
Poor
and
naive
I'm like,
Darren.
I'm always ready to open my heart and to welcome anything into me. But most of the time, there's this big sort of expectation, and people have talked a bit beforehand about a film, and you've seen the trailers, and you've seen the posters, and you think you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that you see a major blockbuster studio film that is significantly better than you would have expected it to be, based on everything that you have seen of it to that point. I think the previous example, past Kong Skull Island, and this probably suggests maybe my interest's a bit too much, is Rise of the Planet of the Apes starring Dave Franco. So maybe just put a monkey in your movie that looks terrible, and Darren will be like, "Wow, this is much
wasn't-
better."
What about the
I
Rock
love
one?
this.
That is unfortunate. Yeah, I
Where
think
they
we
tipped
agreed.
the balance on this one.
I think we agreed that was Darren's secret favorite movie.
Yeah, we
of
did. We
20
did.
That
We
was
absolutely
as
did.
good as it looked.
Much better than it should have been, but still not good at all.
Yeah.
I just want to know what's happening to my friend. Damn it, Rock. Don't touch me there. In my heart, to be
Yes,
clear.
let's make that clear.
Okay. Also, because it happened to be on, I watched a couple of Marvel films. So I watched Black Panther, which is still great. It's interesting in the context of the blowback that Captain Marvel's getting over its treatment of the U.S. Air Force. It's being a lot of arguments about its portrayal of the U.S. Air Force and the idea of like propaganda in that, which is not really a surprise
But it's not
in
really,
a major blockbuster.
It's not really a thing. I mean,
No, I mean, like, Top
there's a
Gun.
litany of films that have. If you want the planes, you want the thing.
That's it. You give a
You don't
bit
have
of-
to say bombing Syria is good. Like you know, that they're not in the films. Like,
and
stop
particularly,
the nonsense,
particularly
people.
because you're aiming for like a very broad crowd
This is the
pleasing sort of
internet,
film.
though. The internet
is
bad
the way
people.
that it is.
Yeah.
And I was just watching Black Panther, and I was thinking about the sort of subplot that hinges on the white CIA agent played by Martin Freeman. Who helped stabilize an African regime and assure its independence from outside influences. God bless his cotton socks. Which is
the good CIA.
The good CIA.
The one that we don't hear about too much because they're evil bastards.
Yeah. Which was something that sort of stuck in my craw a bit when I watched it. Was maybe one of the things that I sort of like was uneasy with. Because again, this is the issue with Black Panther, where it's a fantastically made film. It's really great. It's a very good blockbuster in terms of that sort of stuff. But it's weirdly feels like it's calibrated towards the kind of people who are going to hate it anyway. So you have things like that character, Martin Freeman's character, who seems to exist purely so a white American audience can go, look.
Listen, it was one of those. I think it's almost a reverse wink, though. It's like, we'll give you a white guy for a change, so you know you can identify it rather than the usual token black character that pops up. So I didn't mind that so much in that regard because it is almost a token kind of nod to the. And if the audience don't like it, well, fuck them anyway. Like, you know.
And it remains fantastic. Michael B. Jordan's amazing as
I
Killmonger,
agree. I
who
think
is
he's the best villain
probably the best Marvel Studios villain. I also rewatched Thor Ragnarok actually, or bits and pieces of Thor Ragnarok, which is fantastic.
It is fun. I wouldn't go that far, but I
it
did enjoy it.
It is a better version of Winter Soldier than Winter Soldier. I would argue it is a better version of Black Panther slightly than Black Panther. It's much more subversive, much more wry, and much more playful.
I liked it, but I wouldn't go as far as that.
All right. Finally got round to closing off the Oscar nominees. Well, no, actually, I haven't. We've still got to watch Vice. But
we
the
don't
Mooney,
have to. We've
Mooney
already done
Family
it.
Movie Night,
Go on,
which was Green Book.
I imagine it played pretty well.
It played pretty well, and again, like it's easy to see why. It's a charming film. It's a very conventionally told story with an easy to digest narrative, and it's got two leads who are charming together. I think Ali is much stronger than Mortensen. But when you put them together,
actor. We were discussing this. That he's one of the best actors of our generation.
Maybe our greatest living actor.
I don't know if I got that far, but he's certainly in the conversation.
He is. I mean, again, it's an actor where you come out of Alita Battle Angel and you go, "Wow, that was a good performance."
Takes a lot.
That takes a lot of work, and particularly to make he almost single-handedly makes the terrible twist at the end of the movie. By the way, are we allowed to spoil Alita Battle Angel here?
I'm not going to see it, so I don't care.
Okay, the big twist is that Edward Norton is the villain behind it all, but you only see it in the final shot. Yeah, you only see him in the final shot of the film. But it turns out that Mahershala Ali has been playing a version of Edward Norton for the entirety of the film, and when you leave Alita Battle Angel, you're like, "Wow, that actually clicks into play. That was a pretty good impression. I knew there was something there." The movie itself is terrible. Don't see Alita.
I think he's great though.
He is.
Like, there's a film in Green Book. There's a tremendous film there with him and a good director, like a genuinely great story and interesting
a better
film.
writer.
Yeah, exactly. Not a asshole.
I mean,
but it is there though. You can sense it.
The material's there, and you can imagine if you gave it to a director who knew more about what they were writing about, as opposed to. And again, this is a very 90s heal the world. Two guys talk about and solve racism. For me personally, what kills it is the contrast that you get between the police stop in the south and the police stop once they get up north. It's literally a sequence that exists to tell audience members that look, racist police officers are now literally a thing in the rear view mirror, both in terms of geography because we're in the north, but also in terms of history because hey, we've come a long way since 1960.
It's not good,
right?
and but it's clunky like that all the way through, and that's the problem with it.
It is indeed. But I mean, again, I can see why people like it. I can see why it's charming, and it played like gangbusters.
I don't like anything.
Yeah, it played like gangbusters in the slot that I programmed it, which is great. And then also The Highwayman, very briefly, The Highwayman, which is the Netflix movie that was at South by Southwest, which will be opening later this year, which is directed by the director of The Blind Side, actually, which is John Lee Hancock. He also directed The Founder last year, and
maybe he should stop directing.
I didn't mind The Founder. I was a lot less keen on The Highwayman. The Highwayman is basically, what if Bonnie and Clyde but shot like The Shawshank Redemption? Which is a question that I don't think anybody ever asked. It has this Thomas Newman score, these kind of like wide cinematic shots of the Great Depression Dust Bowl, cars driving down lonely roads, all this sort of stuff that kind of captures this nostalgic Americana for the 30s. It's done in this very cartoonish way. It has a vaguely interesting premise at its core, which is this idea of deconstructing the myth of Bonnie and Clyde by painting them as... Why can't we get behind the police for a change? That's the issue. That's the real problem with it, is that it takes this idea of like deconstructing the romance of Bonnie and Clyde, who are these gangsters who killed lots and lots of people and robbed for their own purposes and didn't give to the poor and killed innocent people. Like, they're not nice people, but they became these sort of celebrities through the folk heroes and celebrities.
It's just so bizarre to me to have a film that deconstructs the romance of Bonnie and Clyde, because we have something that does that. The end of Bonnie and Clyde. But hell.
Oh, it gets better though, or better in inverted commas, because like the movie picks at this idea of like the American folklore. Here's the hero, and you can see it as an extension in some ways of like the modern deconstructionist Western. Think of not even of things like Unforgiven, but think of things like, for example, The Revenant, or think of like The Hateful Eight, for example, Bone Tomahawk, or don't if it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm shuddering here.
Go ahead.
But you have this idea of like picking apart the American past in a popular form.
And it's always interesting to do it if you can do it well.
It is, and it starts out like that. The only issue is that the movie's central premise isn't, well, hey, maybe America's maybe America's opinion of outlaws is something that we need to examine or recontextualize. People who play by their own rules, who don't pay any respect to social conventions. Maybe there's a reason why people do those things, and maybe it's a good thing that they do. But the film settles on, well, Bonnie and Clyde are monsters. But you know who aren't monsters? The Cowboys. Yeah. Literally, the movie establishes its own premise 10 minutes in, when the governor of Texas sits down with the warden of the prison and says, "It's 1934, Lee. Are you telling me you want to set cowboys against Bonnie and Clyde?" And it becomes this weird mismatch, sort of like cowboys and aliens, monsters versus aliens, alien versus predators, except this time it's cowboys versus gangsters. And it's very clear which side it's on. It's really uncomfortable because it has none of the insight, introspection, or nuance that you would expect from the premise of, well, hey, let's look at how America treats outlaws. It becomes like, well, outlaws are grand as long as they're the older kind. The kind your dad likes to watch in movies, played by Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson.
But you drop hats and
they drop hats, beat up suspects, shoot people without cause.
Dirty Harry is back.
Yeah, so that sort of stuff.
This is explicitly pitched at your dad, then.
This is very much... Oh, don't worry, we've got another one of those coming up in the new releases.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah, we've got Daddy's Camping Trip coming up in the new releases.
Yay.
Is that an actual title?
No, I believe that's what the internet calls
Thank
it.
goodness.
Triple Frontier, a.k.a. Internet Daddy's Camping Trip. All right, so that about wraps it up in terms of new releases, but let's talk about the weekend film news. We're going to start with a bit of sad news, unfortunately, the passing of actor Pat Laffan.
Yeah, it just came
in.
Yeah, fine actor. Obviously, be famous for the iconic Pat Mustard in Father Ted, and it's a great performance. Like, it's
a terrific comic performance.
And he's got chops, he's got everything, and all the rest of it. But he popped up in various other things. Like,
we did a bunch of research for this actually beforehand when we found out, and his filmography is amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Literally, if you were making an Irish film between like 1970 and 1998, if even.
Like, Barry Lyndon pops up.
The Saint playing Catholic priest.
Intermission.
Your favourite leap year?
Yes.
My Left Foot, where he plays the barman.
And even a small role in Pigs, the Called Black One, which myself and Ronan have talked about.
Absolutely terrific film, perhaps the best Irish ever made.
Yeah, and he pops in.
It's an incredible career.
And Georgie Burgess, obviously, if you like the Snapper, which I don't because it's terrible. But if you do, that's the Snapper is on every weekend. It's terrible. And I can't.
Even more recently, stuff like Moon Boy. Yes, he was with War Horse.
He's had a long and very great. And it's one of those weird things that you think. People find that sometimes, and I do myself, so you kind of forget that, you see somebody in one role, a.k.a. Pat Mustard, remember. You forget that somebody's a jobbing actor and working and turned up in lots of films over the years. Like, fine actor. He's got real talent, real time, and he's, as we said, he's appeared in lots of stuff. Very sad.
In other news, the Belfast International Film Festival, or Belfast Film Festival, has actually announced their lineup for this year, and it looks like it's quite the selection. The full list is available if you go to Scannain.com or even directly to the Belfast Film Festival site, but some highlights include their opening with A Bump Along the Way, starring Brona Gallagher, written by Tess McGowan and directed by Shelley Love. It's a film centred on the awkward relationship between immature mom Pamela and her disapproving daughter Allegra.
I love Brona Gallagher, so I'm sold.
All right. On the 12th of April, Robert Carlyle is coming to town, actually, which is pretty great. Yeah, he'll be receiving the Outstanding Contribution to Film Award, and he'll be joining Brian Henry Martin in conversation at the Dublin Road Movie House.
And he's going to throw a pint glass over the balcony just in tribute to his so get ready if you look at your people below.
Choose where you sit very carefully at that particular conversation. The following day, Lenny Abramson will be taking part in a public conversation in the Queen's Film Theatre, which is great. One of our great directors, probably one of our greatest directors. And then on the 16th of April, the Indian film megastar Amir Khan will be taking place in conversation at the Belfast
Darren will be fangirling.
I will be. I'm hyperventilating right here. Yeah. And I think we covered this already, but the closing night gala is going to be Beats, which is a universal story of friendship, rebellion, and irresistible power of gathered youth.
I saw this at the festival, the Dublin Film Festival. It's really good, really entertaining.
I don't know what this is. Sorry, I missed this completely.
It is sort of a nostalgic 90s set film about the rave scene in Scotland. And it is terrifically funny. Really, really enjoyed this one. It's not perfect. No film is. But yeah, absolutely. If you're up around Belfast, go see that. It's really, really great to see with the crowd. The crowd I saw it with was sort of a late Saturday night crowd, I think, and it went down a storm.
Excellent.
All right, then. In terms of other news, the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland has awarded €5.7 million in its latest round.
Of which 1.3 went to me, actually.
How much did we get?
We're about to announce, actually.
Countess Markovit's biography.
It's called
God, I would pay for that myself.
God, why hasn't that been made?
It's called Coiled Serpent.
Yes, it is.
Ronan is already working on the making of documentary, The Heart of
Ronan
Darkness.
is going to play a small role as Devil Era.
I would be a dreadful terror.
You could be Collins because of your Cork background.
I don't think I have the height for it.
We'll get you.
To be honest, if a girl from Mogadishu can cast Michael D. Higgins as a 6-foot bald man,
you can do anything, Ronan. You got to dream big, man.
I've got no ambition. It's true.
Watch the hell out of this stuff. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Sorry, go on.
So yes, of that, it's 5.1 million will be awarded to 29 television products, and 90 radio products will get €600,000 between them, which is pretty incredible.
Good multimedia spread there.
Yep. Of those, a total of 222 applications were submitted, requesting 19.8 million, which shows that there's a growing sector there and sort of hunger to develop it. Do you want to get some highlights from this?
We absolutely do, please.
Okay. So, €300,000 for a 3-part TV documentary project, John Connor's Acting Academy, which will be broadcast on RTE2, which is a great idea. It's aiming to focus on young people from marginalised communities who wouldn't get the opportunity otherwise. And again, it's fronted by IFTA award-winning actor John Connors, whose speech was a sort of a huge success.
Of course, it's got a lot of publicity. And I think it's important that this goes out on TV, where these things generally tend to get a much bigger audience than if they had sort of releases elsewhere.
Yeah. Sullivan Productions was awarded €300,000 as well for a feature-length, female-led comedy drama project, Cutters, which is based in an inner-city hair salon in Dublin.
I'm in already.
Yeah,
I want all of that.
All right. Title Films was awarded €214,000 for a cutting-edge 3-part science and nature documentary series for TG4 called CSI Naharan, which will explore extraordinary human stories from different times in our past.
Interesting. Why are they called CSI?
To be hip with the kids.
Branding opportunities.
Yes.
Those 50-year-old kids that love CSI.
Which Who song are we going to use for the opening theme?
It better be Miami, right?
Yeah!
So the president put on a pair of sunglasses and so on and so on. He'll probably actually get what's his face because he's got nothing else.
David
going on.
Caruso.
Yeah,
Well,
he'll do it. He'll do anything for money.
I have to admit, CSI Miami is amazing. I love those.
That show is remarkable.
It's remarkably terrible.
I feel like my lost calling was I was born 10 years too late to be the guy who writes the terrible puns that open the episodes.
Oh,
you
that would have been perfect
my
for
job.
you. No.
Would have been like he's done for the week. That's it. He's done.
And
Monday
it would have been
morning.
a time in media where you would have made a fucking fortune doing it as well, I'd say.
That was, interestingly enough, though, an early example of the kind of show that reacted to its own reception once the internet came along. When people pointed out how ridiculous and stupid it was,
And
it
leaned
leaned
right
into
into
it,
it.
absolutely, and it got years out of it.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a rare TV show. I know we're talking about the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland, but it's a rare TV show that includes David Caruso on a hovercraft with his hair billowing in the wind and like brings pure joy to your
I
household.
might point out that Caruso was in NYPD Blue for
He
years,
was,
right? And then decided that he was an actor.
He wasn't in it. I think he was in for one season.
And then
he
he
was,
said, "Yeah, I'm an actor now."
Yeah, and he was going to leave. And his plan,
Screw you guys.
Going to CSI Miami.
his plan was he assumed that he would tank the show. He didn't think the show would last without him, and they replaced him with Jimmy Smith.
He was a much better actor.
Meanwhile, Caruso's starring in Session 9.
He's very good in First Blood.
And he's also
is,
in a Nick Cage film. Is it a freaking film? Nick Cage body. What's he? What's it called when you bench press? He bench presses his girlfriend, Nick Cage. He's this buffed up guy. It's really bizarre.
Okay.
I must look it up. I'll look it up.
All right. To get
I'll come back
to the
that.
Broadcasting Authority of Ireland story.
I might have got dragged away into something. I apologise.
This is why they give us no money.
Anemo TV Productions was awarded €210,000 for a 4-part TV series, Prison Breaks, which we broadcast on Virgin Media 1, which is a fascinating, it's a great, this is one of those, somebody who came up with the title deserves all of the money, which examined the prison entrepreneurship program in Wheatfield Prison, which aims to offer audiences an alternative perspective on criminals and their rehabilitation while documenting the reality of life on release for small business owners. It's pretty incredible. So the idea is that,
That sounds messy.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that sounds like something you have to navigate very carefully.
Yeah.
I imagine he will. I hope he will.
Yeah.
Not to distract and derail, but the film is called Kiss of Death. It's a remake of the Richard Widmark film.
Is it freaking?
Directed by Barbara Schroeder. No, it wasn't. And David Caruso, Samuel L. Jackson, Nicolas Cage, Helen Hunt, Ving Rhames, and Stanley Tucci.
That's a hell of a cast.
Nicolas Cage bench presses his girlfriend. It's
That reminds
remarkable.
me of
It's good.
the freaking Crusoe film Jade, which is
I think
terrible.
it was around the same
but
time.
looks
That
incredible.
midnight
Jade
90s
was
thriller.
mid-90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jade was the one that was supposed to be his
This was
launching pad to
95 as well.
stardom.
Yeah.
Jade was like, screw
Linda
you,
Ferrantino
NYPD.
was-
Blue.
Jade is bad, but it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it does, yeah. And this Kiss of Death are at the same time, and it's bad, but it's great.
I kind of
Look
love
at
it
the
when
poster.
this,
I mean,
I kind of love listeners cannot look at the poster.
Caruso is above the line in Nicolas Cage eye line terms. That will never happen again, I'm afraid. Good times, good times. I'm afraid we should all watch that now and talk about it next week. I'm watching it, that's it. That's on you if you don't.
In other news, application now open for the latest RAP fund, development support funding. Which
We might get money for the
year.
Markovitz film here.
The Western, well, again, it's Western, so I mean, Sligo, there's a huge strong connection there. But the
terrific.
Western Region Audiovisual Production Fund, which is opening now and will close on April 30th, which is making development loans of up to €15,000 available to support a feature film, television, drama, animation, or game at any stage from treatment to pre-production, which is pretty great.
That's pretty good.
It's excellent to see that specific funding and, flood their inboxes because we need more stories from the West.
Yeah, and if you do want to flood their inboxes, there's an application form available from their website and also from Scannain.com, and just email rap@galwayfilmcentre.ie by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 30th of April, 2019.
That's
Plenty
rap
of
with a
time.
W and not rap as in Eminem.
Let's wrap, kids. All right then, and finally, worth noting that Katie is available on Netflix in the UK and will be available in Ireland following its broadcast on RT.
I think it is not available in Ireland.
Right.
I think it's I Dolores that's in the UK.
I Dolores, apologies. Yes,
But if you, there are ways around these things. But I do want to watch Katie because I missed it in its cinema run before Christmas in that kind of chaotic time.
It's really interesting stuff from Ross Whitaker and how he gets around the fact that his sort of focus here is somebody who is resolutely reticent. She absolutely refuses to be profiled. So it's kind of a fascinating push and pull.
I'm looking forward to it. I like Ross. I like his film, so I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
All right, now it's time for the top 10. Let's guess which one of these Ronan has seen this week.
I'm fascinated.
At number 10, it's Cold Pursuit. Ronan?
No. I did see a poster for it in Germany.
The poster's amazing, isn't it? A Cold Pursuit. It's called Hard Powder in Germany.
Hard Powder. I would watch that film. I would not watch Cold Pursuit.
I know. It's Mr. Plow the movie, basically. And tell
Yeah, it
me-
is.
Hard Powder.
Hard Powder is amazing.
That's a great cliffhanger type 90s era type.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, at number 9, A Dog's Way Home.
Still no.
Ronan.
Ronan.
I know.
Jesus.
This has made €683,000.
How's that possible? There you go.
People like dogs.
People like dogs. Who
It's a
doesn't
very
like dogs?
good
It's true.
boy.
Yeah.
Or very good girl, actually. Sorry, apologies. At number 8, I think this might be it. It's The Hole in the Ground.
Correct.
Well done, Ronan.
I did. I went along to The Hole in the Ground because I was, annoyed to not have got to it so far. It opened in the midst of the film festival, did it?
It did indeed. It opened on the last Friday. And it was we were disappointed that there wasn't a premiere folded into it.
Really
it seems
annoyed
like a
that
wasted
kind of
opportunity.
Ridiculous that it wasn't, but moving on.
Such is life.
I like this quite a bit. It's really good to see Wicklow used so well on screen. It's genuinely really eerie. There's some great overhead shots reminiscent of The Shining, of the military road, that look absolutely fantastic. It's got terrific sound design.
Yeah.
Cronin, who's a first-time feature director, has done great work of, creating a horror atmosphere that makes some of his scares are sort of inclined toward jump scares, but they don't feel cheap in any way because they come out of an atmosphere where you are actively tense. Very well put together. Kerslake's performance is tremendous.
Yeah.
I think if I have a problem with the film, which I do, it's that it can't quite decide what kind of horror film it wants to be. It's sort
It's
of
trying to be 3 at one time.
Yeah, it's straddling this divide between the sort of allegorical take
Babadook
on
style.
trauma, which is explicitly gendered and is really fascinating. Babadook style, absolutely. And there are a couple of other recent examples. Under the Shadows, one I would point out, is something that does this very successfully. And it also wants to be a sort of effective multiplex chiller, which it
Like
kind
The
of
Sense.
manages to be at the same time as well, but not... it's very hard to not explicitly go down one road, and in not doing so, I think the film sometimes feels like it's, not living up to its full potential. But Kerslake manages to keep both of them moving forward very well together. It's a terrific performance. It has a lot of horror staples. You could call them cliches, but they work very well, I think. Cronin has managed to sort of tie them up very, very effectively. I would really, really recommend this.
Yeah, no, I really liked it as well. And again, I think speaking to the thing that you were saying there in terms of it not picking one particular approach, I think I like that aspect of it because there's a sense that if it picked... For me, it was stuck between 3. You suggested 2. The obvious one is the Babadook style psychological gendered horror. Yeah. The other one is the crowd pleasing, without getting too specific, it gets very much like The Descent at a certain point in the narrative. And even things like it's got this wonderful pagan style horror, which is very much the style of what Ben Wheatley's doing in terms of the UK and what we've done with was it Lorcan Finnegan with Without Name?
Yeah, Without Name.
Without Name, which is really recommended as well. And I feel like it doesn't necessarily excel in any one of those fields better than any of those 3 films that I mentioned. Jay, I know you're not a fan of The Descent.
I don't mind it. I
I'm
just
not
think
either.
it's overrated.
Okay.
That's all.
But I think that by combining the 3, it becomes something a bit more interesting. I'm more inclined to like it than I would be if it was just one of those things, because I would inevitably be comparing it to one of those films.
Yeah, that's
And I
fair.
think
It's
off.
trying to become something that's a synthesis of all those things. And I should say, I don't think it's in any way unsuccessful in that necessarily. I feel like, if it had gone down one particular path, it would be beloved by some people while maybe being hated by others. So I can completely appreciate why it's taken this route. I should say it's very effective at being quite atmospherically scary and at the same time really being about something. There are genuinely interesting things here about domestic abuse, trauma. It's got really fascinating things going on under the surface.
And the relationship between mother and child at the centre of it as well.
Yeah, of course. With
one
some excellent references to horror films of the past that never feel like they're stealing from anything.
I mean, there's a wonderful, it has probably the second most horrifying spaghetti eating sequence in recent memory, which is no small accomplishment.
I will say, though, spaghetti eating sequences need to go away in the way that deers getting hit in lonely roads need to go away.
CGI
or
deers.
CGI deers.
There's a certain thing that, there's only so many spaghetti eating sequences I can take. That if it's in this one, that's the 3rd one within 18 months. That's a lot.
All right.
I don't like spaghetti.
At number 7...
Sorry.
Somewhat inexplicably, it's The Aftermath, which
What?
is again this is the one we talked about this literally last week. Jay.
That title is very bland, though.
Keira
It's
Knightley,
yes.
Jason Clarke, Alexander
Jason Clarke.
Skarsgård.
What did we say last week?
Yeah.
If your actor is 3rd build and you don't know who it is, it's more than likely Jason Clarke.
Yeah. who
I
really
read that on
needs a
Twitter.
better
It was one of the
agent.
funniest
Sorry,
things
Jason
I've seen.
Clarke.
Sorry, Jason.
We love Jason
We
Clarke.
do,
He
we
just
do.
needs a much better agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, The Aftermath is the
You've seen
story.
this.
Yeah,
You
it's
didn't like it
not
that very
good.
much. No.
It's an interesting idea, which is the idea of exploring the aftermath of horrible conflict and forcing people to live together in close proximity. It just doesn't do any of the stuff that it's trying to do well at all. It's got this horrible both sidesism going on there. It's got this heightened melodrama, which hinges on a chemistry that simply doesn't exist between any of its three leads. And again, I say that we love you, Jason Clarke, but you're not, like, it's very...
Do we do?
I'm not entirely sure I can imagine Jason Clarke as part of a love triangle and it ever working.
No.
Can I just register my absolute fondness for the phrase both sidesism?
Yeah, it's good.
All right, at number 6, which I actually really enjoyed, and I'm glad to see it doing so well. In fact, actually, the top 10 has been pretty
Is this
static.
Glass?
No.
No, you still haven't seen Glass, have
Okay.
you?
I still haven't seen Glass.
God damn it.
But now
Imagine
I don't
Glass
have to.
making a late re-entry.
That
Straight
would
to
make
number
me
6,
very
yeah.
happy. I have to say.
Shattering box office records. But yeah,
Sorry,
the
Darren.
top 10 have been relatively static, actually. In fact, like I think
Yeah.
as we tick upwards from 6 to 2, we're basically the top 5 last week. So there's been no real disruption outside of that. And I mean, I think we can all guess what number 1 is. Ladies and
Yes.
gentlemen, hold on to your hats for the upcoming release of Triple Frontier. No, it was not Triple Frontier. But anyway, Fighting With My Family is at number 6, which is a film that I saw at the film
You
festival
like this, and Grace liked
really
this.
enjoyed this. It's very paint by numbers. It's very conventional. It's very standard. It hits all of its beats, but it hits them well. And it's got this script by Stephen Merchant, which is funny, understands how the genre works in the way that it does, and I think that's something comedians do relatively well, because in order to tell a joke, you need to understand what you're joking about. You need to be able to pick
structure
the structure of it as well. But it does it in a way where it never seems cynical or deconstructive. Merchant is well aware that he is very much selling a sort of a fantasy on par with the packaged fantasy of WWE wrestling. And while he's cognizant of that fact, and he's aware that the audience is aware of that fact, and while he may make occasional joking, nodding reference to that fact, he never lets that excuse him from doing it very well. It hits all of its beats and all of its marks remarkably well, which is appropriate for a movie about wrestling, which is about hitting your beats and hitting your marks. And it does it very well. It's incredibly charming. It's got a really, really great cast. Florence Pugh is fantastic in the lead role. And again, great support as well. Lena Headey is very good as well. But even Nick Frost is quite good as her father as well. Yeah, I like Nick Frost. You know, Nick Frost.
A little goes
Getting
a long
a
way.
cold reception here for
Indeed.
Nick Frost.
Icy.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I like Stephen Merchant very much. He's had some sort of solo work since he sort of split ways with Ricky Gervais that hasn't been great, but it's clear from their separate paths really since The Opposite Extras who was the funny one in that relationship. So I think it's
Hello
it's
Ladies, I think, was one of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was not good. No.
And it's great. Merchant as well, I think, introduced the film when I saw it. He was like, yes, what everybody's been waiting for. A wrestling film produced by The Rock and directed by the other guy from The Office. It's like, yes. I didn't know I was waiting for it, but I kind of was. At number 5, it's How to Train Your Dragon 3, The Hidden World, which has earned €1.5 million at the Irish box office to
We
date.
should make the Markovitz film as an animation. It will clean up, lads.
How to Train Your Countess.
That's a different sort of film, I think.
Oh, wow.
Stop.
Okay.
Jesus.
At number 4... while also playing at Mooney Family Movie Night, apparently, it's Green Book, baby.
This is
it's
making a
€1
fortune.
million. Yeah, well, I mean, come
Jay
on.
the Seer called this.
Well, no. Jay,
Also, I was making a fortune before I said I.
Jay, like, even the people who dislike the movie, even I don't love the movie, we're like, yeah, this is a crowd-pleasing movie.
You've seen it 7 times there.
Yeah, what can I say?
Is it actually 7?
No, it's 3.
Well,
I knew it was more than one, though. It's always more than one.
You should
Darren.
not go for the Gentleman's 4.
If Darren's fourth lead on a movie, you know it's Darren.
Yeah.
Have to watch it 4 times.
That's it, exactly. It's always interesting when I go and look at my Letterboxd stats and see which movies I've seen most often and how frequently. And once you disqualify the Nolan films, it's an interesting bunch. All right.
It's remarkable to me.
Whatever was released last week, usually.
At number 3, it's Instant Family, which somehow one viewing was enough for me with,
What
which
is
is the
this one?
Mark Wahlberg
Oh,
adoptive
yeah.
family
I
movie.
say this
Oh,
every week.
yes.
What is this one?
And again, this is one of those movies that I can't really explain having the appeal that it does. I guess it's broad. I guess it's feel good.
I hope it's Rose Byrne because I love her.
It is Rose Byrne, playing again the role of the broad comedy wife. It just I didn't like it. I thought it had a lot of difficulty in terms of tone. It struggled a bit in sort of like deciding what story it was telling and how it was telling that story. It's interesting in the context of being a film that's about family, in the sense that most modern films are increasingly about family. But outside of that, it's inert.
Might be showing my age here, but is this what teenagers are going to? Is this the only thing in cinemas for them?
I don't believe this is a teenager film. This is
Really?
No, this is a much old. This would skew much older.
It's a Mark Wahlberg comedy, isn't that? Ted still has a couple of them coming in.
I don't think this is the target audience of Ted, though.
Yeah,
this is like a
Oh,
joke.
no, absolutely not.
Like
but
one of the
some
best
people may.
moments in Instant Family is a cameo from Joan Cusack. In fact, there's lots of little touches.
I
One of
love
the
Joan
great one of the great things.
Yeah, I'd go for that.
I'll go to bat
I
for
won't, but,
Instant Family. I'll go to bat for Instant Family on this point, which is that I think Sean Anders does a good job. He recruits a number of older sort of like kind of female actors who you haven't seen in a while in like a major studio film, and you hope they got a decent paycheck out of, and they all mostly have good fun with it. There's a wonderful couple of adoption sort of or foster service workers who are played by Tig Notaro and Octavia Spencer, who are arguably worth price of admission. I would much rather watch a movie about them than the nominal lead characters. But anyway, at number 2, the Lego Movie 2, which is interesting because again, this is like some of the other movies we've talked about here, like Green Book, for example, which was a box office disappointment on its release in the States. These movies have surprising sticking power. They didn't open big. In fact, like the opening couple of weeks of the year were remarkably poor in terms of box office, American and international. But it looks like it's weird that March has been so barren and empty that these sort of like these dead February releases may somehow find sort of a long-term life, which is great. I really liked Lego Movie 2. I said when I saw it, it's not going to make my top 10 of the year. As the year marches on, it looks like it might possibly do that, which is kind of worrying.
That's a bad sign.
Not a reflection on Lego Movie 2, to be clear. More or less reflection on everything since.
I shall have seen this by next week.
It has earned €1.8 million at the Irish box office to date.
Jay's going to take it to 2.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And at number 1, do we even have to tell you what number 1 is?
Yeah.
Okay, it's Captain Marvel.
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Oh.
Earning €878,000 in its opening weekend, which is
this is a behemoth worldwide.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. $55 million
and over 500 million now.
Yeah. In its first weekend, is it the highest grossing solo premiere film for a superhero, which is staggering. Yeah, it's one of the highest grossing Marvel Studios films. If it continues at this pace, it will have tremendous legs. It's
almost like people want to see films about women.
Yeah, I mean,
steady.
Careful now.
Steady.
Careful now. You'll be looking at the success of something.
I better
like
not tweet that.
Yeah, you'll be looking at something like the success of Black Panther and saying people want to see movies about minorities next. I mean, come on. We're 3 white guys on a podcast. We know what people want.
We know
in the very week,
want.
Marvel has greenlit its first Asian superhero, I understand.
Which one?
By director of Short-Term
12.
Asian
yeah.
origin.
Descendaniel Cretton.
Which character?
I have no idea. Some minor thing.
Okay.
He's a kung fu master, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, Shang-Chi!
Yes,
That's the one, yeah.
That sounds right.
That's amazing.
God damn it, Darren. That's all you need to get it. My God, it's going to my head and then again.
This is why we hire you.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi's amazing. Shang-Chi is the master... Sorry, we're going to talk about Captain Marvel in a moment. But Shang-Chi is the master of Kung Fu. But he's this obscure... Well, okay, obscure in inverted commas. But this character who began when Kung Fu was a thing in the mid-70s, Kung Fu PlayStation.
Yeah.
And Marvel basically got in this. The same way that they got in on Blaxploitation with Luke Cage.
Sure.
But basically, Shang-Chi is interesting because he was a character who was largely replaced in the Marvel line by... Oh, you're going to love this. Guess who replaced Shang-Chi as Marvel's martial arts 70s Kung Fu exploitation hero?
You were asking the wrong man.
I'm fairly sure you can get this. What Marvel property has had some issues with cultural appropriation in the past couple of years when they tried to bring in...
TV one, is it?
Yes!
Iron Fist,
the immortal Iron Fist, Danny Rand. But yeah, so Shang-Chi is kind of what he was obscured, forgotten, pushed to the edge. In fact, I'm surprised that many people remember him now. He's one of those characters who pops up when writers are like, hey, I have a big 70s comic book collection. Watch me drag this guy out. So he's getting his own movie. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting because the director is Destin-Daniel Cretton, which is bizarre.
Short-term 12 frame.
And between that, Lakeith Stanfield and Brie Larson's Short-Term 12 seemed an incubator for
and Rami Malek.
And Rami Malek, yeah.
Yeah, but so Captain Marvel, which is, I kind of wish it were better. It's solid, it's sturdy, it's mid-tier superhero stuff. It hits most of its boxes and does most of what you expect it to do, but it unfortunately kind of suffers a little bit from the fact that it backloads a twist, which means that it can't actually do any character development in its opening act, which is a shame when, like, the major appeal of most of the Marvel films is the charisma of their lead actors or characters. So, like, for most of the movie, the character known as Vers, who will become Captain Marvel, is nothing but a snark machine. And Larson she's a very good actor, she's a great actor, but she's not necessarily perfectly suited to slotting into the generic Chris Pratt, Robert Downey Jr. snark role. And it feels like if the film had given her more to do, it would be a much, much better film for that. It's a shame, because otherwise it's got some good ideas there. It plays with some nice sense of, like, 90s nostalgia. It does some interesting stuff with 90s nostalgia in that its primary characters are kind of positioned in a way where they mean something different in the context of the 90s setting. Where, like, the Skrulls are this sort of, like, faceless conspiracy out of the line of, say, the X-Files or JFK, that sort of stuff. But when you move them into 2018, they become something slightly more ominous, where they're this sort of monstrous alien invasive horde that are sort of coming across the galaxy. And you have then the Kree, who are, like, in the context of a 90s action movie, look like a hangover from the 80s with their communism, their talk about the collective, their insistence that you should not care about yourself, but care about your people. And then sort of over the course of the film, as we get close to 2018, morph into this weird alt-right sort of, like, you know, machismo kind of, like, extreme masculine culture. Like, there's a sequence at the end of Captain Marvel, and again, the movie has its flaws. I don't think it's fantastic, but there's a moment that I literally cannot wait to appear as a GIF online, because it so perfectly encapsulates the experience of talking to somebody like that online. It's a moment where one of the characters stands up to this woman who's proven herself as this tremendous hero who's done this amazing deed. He's like, "I'm so proud of you. I didn't even realize you had that power in you. But can you come down here, turn your powers off, fight me with your fists? Come on, do it." And it's just great. It's really, really great. But yeah, worth it for that moment. So let's move on to the upcoming releases. What's in cinemas this weekend? In terms of new releases, Fisherman's Friends, which I had pegged as the surprise film at the Dublin Film Festival.
What on earth is this?
A group of singing Cornish fishermen get offered £1 million recording contract and see their album skyrocket into the top 10 in the UK pop charts.
Why are you smiling?
Because it sounds terrible, doesn't it? It
does.
Like, it's the full Monty, but with singing instead of stripping. And fishing instead of steelworking. But this is this is the movie that I had pegged as the surprise film at the film festival, because it's normally this sort of thing. It's a mid-tier release, nobody cares about.
Don't remember the clue of anchovies. So he's like, it has to be Fisherman's Friend. And then we got 5.5 hours of Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn saying anchovies.
But yeah.
God, I hate that film so much.
Also out this week is Girl, which Laura...
This is the controversial...
some questions revolving around this about trans representation and
the right to make the film
and play trans characters. It was Belgium submission for the Oscars, I think. This year.
It's Netflix required it, so it'll rock up on Netflix at some point, I think.
Yeah,
maybe not worldwide, but certainly in certain territories.
Opening theatrically here, and I'm interested to see this. I haven't read too much about the controversy.
Kind of walking a kind of tight line in terms of what they say about it. But apparently, it's well made, from what I gather, anyway. But there's issues around the filming, and
I will report back next week.
Yep.
And everything having cleared way for Captain Marvel last week, we've got a little bit of a flutter here. We've got The Prodigy, which is one of those March horror films starring Taylor Schilling as a mother concerned about her young son's disturbing behavior, thinks something supernatural may be affecting him.
I just saw Peter Bradshaw's review of this, where he gave it a gentleman's one.
Oh, wow.
So just take that from what you will.
Quick reminder that The Hole in the Ground is still in cinemas.
Yeah, and it's losing screens this week, which is unfortunate. So see it while you can.
I shall be seeing it.
And it's a film that I would wholeheartedly recommend seeing in a cinema.
Yeah, it is genuinely makes excellent use of sound design if you get a cinema with good speaker system.
We are talking about The Hole in the Ground, to be clear, as Jay pointed out.
Yes.
Have a wonderful time.
And this is one that's interesting, because I was kind of hopeful about this, even as the reviews started pouring in. It's Under the Silver Lake, which apparently is just dull.
Donald Clark gave it 1 star in the Irish Times.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
His famously cryptic observation that one of the rare filmmakers where he'd gone from giving 5 stars to 1 star in the space of a single film.
That might also say more about why you shouldn't have given 5 stars. As
Yep.
well.
Yep.
That's
In my
opinion. No.
Wherever,
It is-
even if you like
Jay?
It Follows, it is not. And I
Jay?
repeat,
How
not
is it ever
a
a 5-star
5-star
film?
Jay?
Would you stop? Didn't you see the last act?
Jay?
Oh, the swimming pool!
Jay,
Stop.
it is entirely possible for
It's
a
not
director
Darren.
to make a great film and a bad film.
It is, of
But he
course.
hasn't. That's not this director. though.
Not this guy.
Okay, but
I
again,
still want to see this,
I'm-
though.
I'm
Having said
very
that.
curious about
Yeah, me too.
Again, this is going to be one of our Travolta movie clubs. Ronan, are you in?
I'm in. I'm
Right.
absolutely in. I saw the trailer for it last night, and it looked interesting. To
It
me.
looks like one of those Shaggy Dog Story, LA,
Yeah.
The Long Goodbye-esque.
I like Andrew Garfield. He can
Me
do
too.
sort of buggy and strange, and he can often be a really good thing in a really uninteresting film. What was the thing he did with Michael Shannon? 99 Homes?
Yes.
He's good in that, and it's not a good
Great,
film.
though. No.
No, I think he gives a
Yes.
really interesting performance.
He's really
Not a good
really
film.
not good in silence. But that's not his fault. He's in the wrong role. But yeah, I like him. He's a good actor. He's great in Social
I find
Network.
myself in that position of not really liking Silence all that much, but still liking it much more than you.
I don't know what to say to that. Darren.
Not hard.
Fine.
I may revisit at some point in about a decade or so.
I should say I kind of liked it, but I'm very amused by Jay's dislike of it. I like Jay's dislike of
Very
it more
umbrella.
It's
than
very
Yeah.
hurtful, though.
Yeah.
It's like being rejected by somebody you idolise. It's very hurtful. I really don't like the
Feed,
feeling.
Yeah, I would happily feed that.
Don't, because it upsets me. It upsets me that I didn't love it.
All
And
right.
I'm worried about the Irishman.
Well,
God
he
damn it, I did
was
some
he was
years.
sued into making silence.
It's
Which
a
is always a good
two
sign.
words you never want to hear about a film. Passion
Contractual
project.
obligation.
Or passion project.
Yeah. All right. Also out this week, Ben is Back, or Keanu as a prestige picture in its best moments. It's another one of those movies that's trying to look at the opioid crisis.
Can we
in there.
ask why are these films turned up? Not only this one, but also the
Beautiful Boy?
and then the other two, which are the kind of the gay conversion therapy ones.
Oh,
These
yeah.
kind of
Oh,
issue
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of movies.
Well, because
They're
it's Oscar
repeat-
season,
but
these,
it's
like-
Lifetime movies. They're not even good. Like
Yeah, that's why they're being released in March, Jay.
Yeah, these are
like
the ones
these
that they
talked
prepared
up
for the
on the
Oscars,
yeah.
then they saw them and were
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
no.
no.
people should probably stop doing these. Is what I'm saying. Yes.
Sometimes it's
Agreed.
possible. It's possible to
Beautiful
create...
Boy is amazing. That's all I'm saying. That. It's
Yeah,
dreadful.
no, that's the thing. Like,
The
Beautiful Boy is
Notebook, the diary,
transcendently.
is
Yeah,
the
it's-
diary scene is one of
the
the
ominous,
greatest things
like,
I've ever
synthesizer,
seen. It's
like,
incredible.
reflection and Steve Carroll's face from the monitor
Oh
in
my
the dark
God,
room.
it's
where
a
There
bad
was
film.
there was the most wonderful moment in a very bad horror film called The Wind at the Dublin Film Festival where
We've
that-
seen this.
yeah, we saw it
Yes,
together. I turned to Jay at one point and went, I bet you there's a notebook in a moment. And
I
there
know about
was. There was.
The
That's,
notebook
that's a
full of
thing now.
exposition.
The notebook.
like
They
spaghetti.
found the script.
It's like spaghetti.
They should have given it to them before they started filming. But no, one of the great things Darren praised me to do was watching
Beautiful Boy.
Beautiful Boy. It's one of those great, terrible films that
Yeah.
I'm really, really glad I watched.
Ben is Back is unfortunately a little better than Beautiful Boy, but not good
not
enough
nearly
to
as much
be-
fun, I would
and it's
imagine.
not nearly as good enough as it should be. It's got this interesting push and pull between being a prestige picture about a boy who comes home from rehab and he's got to reconnect with his family, with being a gonzo tale about a dog abduction at Christmas, in which a
Hang on,
mother
what?
has to
What?
This is
This
Keanu
is the
as a
same
prestige picture.
Can I just? Is this the Lucas Hedges?
Yeah.
Is under blink twice if you want A294 to let him go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so it's
I'm
fine.
proud.
It averages out to fine. It's
I
half.
like Julia. Is this the Julia Roberts one? I like Julia
Yes.
Roberts,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to see this.
Also out this week, What Men Want.
You saw this.
I saw this last night. We almost had a cinema date, except
We
you went to
did.
see Hole in the Ground. You got a much better deal. No, What Men Want is arguably the best version of the film that it could be, which is damning with the
Darren,
faintest
I
of
hate
praise.
when you say that. Like this
What
worries
does
me
that
more.
mean?
What does it even
Adam-
mean exactly?
It's an Adam Shankman comedy about a woman who gains the ability to read the minds of men
I know, because I
around
don't
her.
remember the Mel Gibson version
Yeah.
of it. This, I imagine, it's aged horrendously. I'd be afraid of my life to even watch 30 seconds of
And
it.
one of the interesting things about What Men Want is it's unashamedly leaning into sort of like we're doing a blaxploitation version of this movie that everybody's forgotten about, right down to casting.
I haven't forgotten about it.
Right down to casting the original John Shaft, Richard Roundtree, as Ali, the main character's father.
That's interesting.
Which is an interesting choice. like, it's held together by glue and the force of will of Teresia P. Henson, who is the lead actor, who is astonishing, just generally speaking, who commits wholeheartedly to a much greater extent than the film around her deserves. No. This is a movie that never works for a joke when it thinks it can score a cheap layup. So yeah, expect lots of jokes about how men are always thinking about sex.
But this is true, though. Everybody knows this.
I mean, if it's 90 minutes...
Stay for Jay's sort of like type 5 stand-up comedy section here.
I got it. How about those Eagles?
Yeah.
No, we're not doing that.
If it's 90 minutes of Taraji P. Henson laying into men, that sounds fine.
It's not necessarily laying into men. It's gender politics are interesting in inverted commas. Yes, it is very much in the lean-in school.
And is it 90 minutes?
It's a little over 90 minutes, but it's sort of gets
2 hours and 40. Suicidally long.
Well, I mean, like this is the thing where it when I say it's the best version of the movie it could be, this is, like we talked earlier this year, we've had a number of female-led comedies about this sort of stuff. So we had, for example, like Isn't It Romantic, which is the Rebel Wilson one, which is available on Netflix, which is a romantic comedy in the style of playing with all these cliches and tropes and conventions that What Men Want also plays with. You've also had, like, Second Act, which is the one with Jennifer Lopez, which is another story about a woman trying to navigate the corporate world and sustain a relationship at the same time. And watching What Men Want illustrates, like, how horribly wrong those films got the very simple formula that should drive them. Like, I mean, to the point where, Isn't It Romantic, we talked about this, where it's trying to have its cake and eat it, where it points out all these toxic romantic tropes, like, for example, the gay best friend character, just so it can justify having this horribly cliche 90s homophobic gay best friend character. It feels very much like we pointed out, it's the Marvel style of joke, which is, we made the joke so we can have the thing, so you don't get to point out how stupid it is.
It's like, we're aware about it, so it doesn't count.
We don't have to push any further. What Men Want, like, has... Her personal assistant, Brandon, is gay, and he fills the story role of the gay best friend. He's the confidant that she can talk to. And while the film doesn't necessarily do anything in terms of pushing boundaries, it at least gives him A, agency in a very literal and I hope knowing way. It B, gives him his own sort of personal character arc. He gets to have his own personal relationship outside of it. One of the big central relationships in the film is arguably his relationship with a closeted male co-worker. And it also just, like, it treats him as a character to an extent that these movies generally do, which is not much, but just enough, if that makes sense. Yeah. And Second Act has a similar sort of thing, where it has this moment where the character's been lying to the people in her lives all around her, feels really bad about it, and needs to get it off her chest. And Second Act plays this as a hugely triumphant moment in which, at a shareholders meeting, she announces that she's been defrauding the company and has been taking advantage of their generosity, kindness, and has not done any of the work whatsoever on a live webcast going out across the world that will tank the company's share value and bankrupt everyone that she claims to care about, while also saying, I'm not going to do this presentation because that would be a lie. I'm going to let my assistants do it, despite the fact I didn't warn them I was going to do this, and they're completely unprepared to do this presentation because I'm a generous person, which is horribly ill-judged. But when What Men Want does a similar thing where the character has this big moment of catharsis in a very public forum, it understands enough to at least paint that as a sort of a nadir of her character arc rather than a triumphant moment. And again, these are really, really small victories, but they're at least competent in a way that many of the films sort of playing with these tropes generally aren't. And so, yeah, it's gets the gentleman's 2.5. You know.
All right. I'm not seeing it, but it convinced me that, you know, it's probably worth 2.
And then also finally on Netflix, and probably my pick of the week. I know what a week it's been.
You've not been saying there are many great things this week.
Triple Frontier, aka Internet Daddy's Camping Trip, which is the J.C. Shander film on Netflix.
Interesting that if you watch Sport Roll, Sky tend to run the same ads all the time, and they've been running this like it's been advertised in the cinema. Yeah. Like, this wacky kind of, you know, on Netflix on Friday or whatever. Like. And I mean, you think it's going to be in the cinema until the Netflix bit hits. Now, I already knew it was on Netflix, but...
More than that, this is the first Netflix film that I believe has a press tour. They've had Affleck and the boys out doing press for this. Oscar Isaac, Charlie Hunnam, Pedro Pascal, and Garrett Hedlund. Yes, I remembered all 5 of them. I think I deserve a star of some
That's your generation's Magnificent 7 actors, isn't it?
Oh.
Wow.
What a generation we are, apparently.
Yeah.
No, it's relatively solid. It's a very simple premise, which is a bunch of men wander into a situation for which they have no control, end up fighting against nature and themselves as they try to struggle to stay afloat. It's got all of Chander's pet sort of themes and influences in there. It's very much like the J.C. Chander grab bag. It's got your treatise on capitalism in the style of Margin Call, but also A Most Violent Year in the style of, well, isn't capitalism terrible in how it makes us all violent and do horrible things to one another? In that this is a bunch of 5 men who decide to rob a drug baron and embark with his millions and millions of dollars of cash across South America. It's got that sort of men against nature that defined All Is Lost with Robert Redford, in that, again, they find themselves in a situation where they're struggling against nature to survive, although there's an element of surviving against themselves as well. And it does all these things relatively well. It's got, like A Most Violent Year, it's got that real affection for the kind of cinema that you don't really see anymore, while not being as good as the best of it, if that makes sense. And I really liked A Most Violent Year. I know that Ronan enjoyed it while thinking it was derivative.
Yeah, I'm quite fond of it. I think it's tipping its hat in a way that does often feel derivative, but it feels like it sort of earns it to me. I know.
Whereas Jay just thought it was derivative. And that's a kind word, I believe.
Absolutely dreadful.
But I really liked it. But again, you can see that this is part of that. This is very much the style of, you could imagine going to a cinema in the 90s in the middle of June and this being on and people being like, hey, you see that? No. It was grand. That sort of thing.
Ew. Why are we aiming for that?
Well, I mean, I liked it a lot. It kind of, and again, it kind of tickled the nostalgia bones a little bit. Yep. And there's something fun about seeing a movie these days that is driven by, as much as we have star power, Oscar Isaac and Ben Affleck, who are
all we got though.
Well, I mean, like the old style movie star is dead. Like, I mean, again, that's part of the issue.
Should he come back though?
That's
not a great.
Please.
That's part of the issue with the Highwayman, is that, like, as much as it's glamorizing the old cowboy, it's glamorizing Kevin Costner as the old cowboy. It's almost like a nostalgic. Remember when Kevin Costner made movies in the 90s?
I love Kevin Costner.
He's great.
Yeah,
he's the reason I saw Man of Steel.
Same here.
Was he the reason you saw Batman and Superman?
No. Is he in that?
Yes.
I thought he died.
In the extended edition.
But he died.
He did. There are flashbacks and dreams, Jay.
Of course there are. I did not see that because I saw 4 minutes of it on Sky Movies and I laughed and turned it off.
Didn't Superman also die?
Did he?
Dun, dun, dun. Well, we will answer that question next week, ladies
Will we
and gentlemen.
though? Let's remember that, because let's not disappoint our audience by not answering that question.
In the mean, because
write that down somewhere.
What happened to that Superman fellow? But if people are looking for Jay, a bit more Ronan in their lives, where can they find you guys?
Natterway on Twitter and Letterboxd at Baron Ronan.
At Jay Coyle on Twitter.
You can follow me at Darren_Mooney. I also host another podcast called The 250, where this week, to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, we're teaming up with When Irish Eyes Are Watching, which is hosted by Alex, who's a occasional
dear
guest
friend
on this podcast. And we're discussing Room, Lenny Abramson's 2015 film.
Very nice.
Which
Interesting.
Is that on the 250?
It is indeed. 151.
I'm constantly surprised at the things that are on that list.
Yeah, and one suspects the timing may have been an issue of it. It's hard to imagine a feminist Brie Larson film getting as accepted by the internet today as it was.
Nostalgia for
2015. I know.
Oh, Jesus, what world?
It feels like it was 40 years ago, right? Man. Also, I should probably mention, I alluded to it earlier, I am doing a very stupid thing for charity, which is the 18-hour live Twin Peaks The Return podcast, which will be broadcast on Saturday the 23rd of March from 2 p.m. Irish time straight through to 8 a.m. Irish time the following morning. We'll be discussing a range of topics, and we've got a host of great guests, one of which is on the podcast with me right now.
I shall be there, being potentially liveless on a live show. I can't wait
There's
to
no
walk
way to
that tightrope.
edit this,
Yes.
Mooney. Edit this.
My God, it's going to cost the Mooney movie.
Finally got him not pre-recorded.
VHS from now on, because they can't afford anything else because they'll have been sued. No, we won't talk about that.
We have a host of really great guests we're very proud to have. So we have people like... But yeah, like Donald Clark from the Irish Times will be coming in to talk a little bit about David Lynch beforehand. We've Amy Shields, who appeared on the show playing Andy.
Fantastic.
She'll be talking to us for about an hour in the middle of the day. We've got some American podcasts and some Australian podcasts will be joining us to keep us company through the night.
Because you literally have to source from all around the world
in order
to keep it going this whole time.
Yeah. And and some other great stuff as well. Charlene Lydon from The Lighthouse will be there.
Fantastic.
It's really, really good. We have the chief film critic Brian Lloyd of Entertainment.ie and Jen Gannon, who writes film criticism for the Irish Times, I believe, as well. She'll be there?
No, that's Irish Times.
Okay.
Somewhere else. You say so.
Well, she's written from a variety of sources anyway, so she'll be joining us for that as well. And we'll be discussing everything from is it a film or is it a movie, straight through to,
I can decide that for you now, Darren.
I suspect everything you will be discussing. You have a lot of time.
I must start re-watching bits for consumption.
Yes. Well, all 18 hours.
Very sinister. You said that.
Just live. The possibilities are endless.
I
can't wait. Genuinely can't wait. It's going to be great fun.
All right, take it easy, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.